What's up, everybody? Tom Pelissero here with Judd Zulgad across the street from Vikings headquarters on Tuesday. Shortly after a big day for the Minnesota Vikings here, Judd, although not an entirely surprising one, Rick Spielman named the general manager. Will now take over all football operations, have the final say over the 53-man roster. If they were going to do it, and I think that the course of the season dictated that they were, this was the logical guy. Doesn't mean it's the right guy,
right,
but it's the obvious thing to do.
It's the logical move, right?
Yes.
I mean, this is the move they had to make. This is a move they should have made 1 year ago. This is the move they should have made when they hired Les Frazier. If they were going to make Rick Spielman the guy, it should have been done a year ago. It was a ridiculous notion on the Wilfs' part to ever think that they were going to hire Les Frazier as head coach, leave Spielman in his VP role, and then tell him to play nice. You could have told them a year ago on this day when they made the move with Frazier that would not work. And you know what? It didn't work.
The funny part was we were sitting there, and it was me and about 5 other reporters around the same desk, and I pointed out to the Wolves, I said, we sat in this very room 1 year ago, and you said you believe you have the people in place that will allow this structure to work. At what point did you realize it wasn't going to work? And basically their response was, when you go 3-13, they realized, Ziggy Wolf said it best, that they realized that even through the success, they should have seen the issue here. They should have understood, even though they had won a lot of games, which was the reason that they figured this could continue to work, they still should have been able to identify the fact that for the long-term stability of the football operation, you can't survive like this.
But when did they win a lot of games? Because Brad Childress, okay, but that was Brad Childress having final say on the 53-man. The biggest problem that they had was trying to think that in the NFL, 2 people could play nice. It doesn't happen. It doesn't work that way. You need one decision maker. I didn't agree with giving Childress as much power as they did. However, at least you had one guy who could walk into Spielman's office and say, this is what we're going to do. This year, you didn't have that guy, and it turned into a complete disaster, as you know, when it came to personnel decisions.
Yeah, there's a lot of vitriol in my Twitter feed about this move toward Rick Spielman. Some people in support of it, a lot of people, though, asking why it's him, saying his drafts suck and all that. My response would be, there have not been a lot of times you can really look over Rick Spielman's track record and say, this was him. This was his chance to do the vision. You can look in 2004 in Miami, where they have a disaster season, his 1 year as GM there. Before that, he was a personnel guy who had a head coach over him. For his first 4 years here, he was a personnel guy who had a head coach over him. This is really, this is definitely the first opportunity he's had in Minnesota to make these sorts of decisions. And as you look at some of the things that have unfolded and haven't gone the Vikings' way, going back to the Donovan McNabb decision, which was Leslie Frazier pushing for it, they were at a point where they were ready to move on with a different quarterback. Instead, they bring in McNabb. It didn't necessarily have a huge impact long-term on what ended up happening with the franchise, because it was going to be a 1 year or half-year deal no matter what. But it changed the expectations. It artificially inflated things at a time that a lot of people from the personnel side could look in and go, this isn't going to go well.
And if there's going to be one defining move of Les Frazier's tenure here with the Vikings, especially when it comes to personnel, it's going to be McNabb.
Sure.
He solely went out, and he's the guy that thought it'd be a good idea to bring in McNabb. Les is the guy, we all know this, that misjudged this team and thought it could win. For whatever reason, he thought this was going to be a 6-10 team that could all of a sudden go 10-6. Nobody else saw that. Nobody saw 3-13. I think a lot of us saw 6 to 8 wins. But the move that was made today, whether you like Spielman or not, is the right move. This franchise desperately needed a GM who was not the head coach, who was a separate person who could take a long view look at this. And now the only question, Tom, is how long is this going to take to turn around? And honestly, in my opinion, as much as I like Les Frazier, he's probably not going to be the head coach to oversee the turnaround long term.
Well, and what's interesting here is now you have a situation where Rick Spielman now has the power, and the idea is that all the responsibility and the accountability will come across his desk. But if the Vikings flop in 2012, who's accountable then?
Les Frazier.
Frazier's the one who will probably pay the price, because we don't know the length of Spielman's deal, but the presumption is he got a new deal in all of this. He's the guy that the Wilfs trust. He's been their football guy from the day that he arrived, the person they would go to ask the questions. There's a reason that he's in this position, and they didn't go outside the organization. But if the team's bad next season, it could be Frazier, because Frazier's on a 3-year deal, and next year's year 2.
Not it could be, it will be. Rick Spielman has clearly probably convinced these guys, look, Leslie made some missteps this year. I can fix this, but it's going to take a while. The Vikings were 3-13 this year for a reason. They were a 3-13 team. They were terrible. Players will tell you that games were close and the locker room didn't fall apart, and that's all great and good and fantastic.
Good teams make plays to win close games.
And you know what? This was a bad football team. And Rick Spielman, if he does have a plan, which I'm sure he does, I don't know if it works or not, it's not going to be a 1-year plan. Odds are, with Frazier having a 3-year deal, and potentially that 3rd year could be some sort of option deal, is that the turnaround will be done by Spielman if it happens, and a new head coach.
The other aspect of this that we were discussing before when we were talking on the hallway was about why do it now? Why do it 2 days after the season? Now the Wilfs have a history. You can go back to when they named Leslie Frazier head coach or signed him to the deal on the same day as the season finale. They want to move quickly. They are impulsive. They're fans. They're passionate. Sometimes I think that blinds them. But the other aspect of this is no matter what Leslie Frazier said or didn't say today, there are going to be significant changes to the defensive coaching staff.
Yes.
In my opinion, they all get wiped out, every last one of them. A couple of people may be allowed to pursue other opportunities somewhere else, but they are going to overhaul it. And Rick Spielman, I believe, has strong feelings about what direction he wants to go with that group.
Well, and it's interesting because Spielman and Frazier were asked today about the coaching staff, about the assistants, about who would make the calls on this. And Spielman made it very clear that Frazier would be the one making the calls on his coaching staff.
But
we have to write that and convey what he said. But on video, I think we can both safely say that we both think Rick Spielman is going to have a huge say in how this coaching staff, especially on the defensive side of the ball, shapes up in 2012. And still, don't eliminate what you've been writing for a while, which is we very well could see a 3-4 defense.
And this is the big difference here. He said, no, Frazier will control the scheme and he will control the staff, but he doesn't control the philosophy. That's what the GM does. If the GM says we are going to pursue a 3-4 coordinator, we're going to pursue Steve Spagnuolo, we're going to bring in a 4-3 guy, we're going to go get that personnel to do this. He has to have the overall vision of what they can do.
Yep.
Frazier has to be a part of that. But I thought that Frazier, even entertaining the idea today of a 3-4, he said, my background's in 4-3. But when pressed on, could you run the 3-4? He said, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, and that was the key thing to me, is he did not dismiss it. Frazier's the tone of his comments have changed so much in the past 2 weeks. You know, I think Spielman today said that this decision was made on Monday. Yeah, right. I've got some land to sell you. This decision was made a couple weeks ago, clearly. And Frazier's comments from that point on have really turned. And the opportunity, the 3-4 is very interesting because Jared Allen and Kevin Williams have both come out and said, we really don't want to do that. Jared Allen's a key cog here. But you're 3-13. You're nowhere near, you're a few years away from being good. You need draft picks. Who's your one really tradable commodity?
That'd be Jared Allen. And you do have to take a global perspective. It would be highly unpopular if they looked to trade Jared Allen, or even if they looked to shift to a 3-4 and make Jared Allen into an outside linebacker, because Allen would come out publicly and be upset about it. And it would be another whole issue they'd have to deal with. But you have to look at the overall vision of the roster right now. If you're a fan, would you rather have 22 sacks or would you rather win more than 3 games? You should be able to do both, but are you really going to bend to appease a 30-year-old player? Allen might have 1 or 2 years left. I know there's concern, though, within Vikings headquarters about how much more time Allen has because coaches ride him. He plays 99% of the snaps.
And he won't come out.
How long is he really going to be able to sustain this? It might be a couple years. Maybe he's the rare guy who can do it until he's 35.
But he wants to play that many snaps.
He does.
And that's the issue with him. But what is Rick Spielman going to look at when it comes to Jared Allen? He's going to look at the fact that Brad Childress in 2008 came to him and said, we got to get a defensive end who can get sacks. And so he went to Kansas City, which was a terrible team. Jared had a big falling out with the Chiefs. And Kansas City got a lot from the Vikings. And I think Rick's going to look at the same thing now. And if they are going to switch to a 3-4, probably going to make those same phone calls and say, what can we get from you for Jared Allen? Because, in my opinion, with Adrian Peterson hurt, Jared is the one tradable commodity that Spielman's going to have. And Spielman is going to look, I think, to put his mark on this franchise.
I read nothing into the fact that they haven't made any coaching moves today, even though other people around the league are doing it, because Leslie Frazier, as we learned last year, would much rather just tell people you're free to look for other jobs while he tries to bring in your replacement than he would actually putting out a press release that I'm canning my entire defensive staff.
And once again, let's go back to the point that Rick Spielman has a big say in this. The guy who I don't think is going to survive now at all, and I did a couple weeks ago, is Singletary. I think Mike Singletary is as good as gone.
I've heard too many things about Singletary and the real preoccupations there are among players and other people in the building. I mean, there's the fact that he leaves when they're in Detroit the night before the game and skips all the meetings to go to a wedding. I've never heard of that before. It better be your wedding.
I don't even know beat writers that travel and go to weddings when they're covering games, and they usually go out drinking the night before the game.
He's Judd. I'm Tom. Full coverage is always at 1500ESPN.com, and it will not slow down anytime soon. See ya.